everyone. This is Zia with Saboor and Bakhtiar. Bakhtiar and Saboor. I apologize for that. A lot of Muslims, Pakistanis in particular, came to the United States because it is the land of opportunity. But some of us came here because it is the land of freedom. We actually feel we probably have more religious freedom in this country than we did where we came from. Some may disagree with me. But in the last few years, it seems like things that the United States always stood for is taking a back seat. Park 55, the mosque, the famous mosque near the Ground Zero, is one example. There are other mosques which were being set up in Oklahoma, I believe in Kansas, that were shut down as well for the same reason. And most recently, Lowe's pulled its advertisements from a Muslim reality show, calling it a controversial subject. Quite a few of us were really offended by them, and but we're again flabbergasted by the lack of protest or vocalization of that issue. Why don't we come out and say things that we should? Why don't we come out and talk about it? It seems sometimes that we are rapidly becoming a second-class citizens, probably not far from what Jews felt back in the late 30s and early 40s in Germany. Is that the direction that the United States is heading as far as Muslims are concerned, or is that too far a view that I'm taking?
I hope it's an extremist view, but there are moments when you hear the debates, the national discourse, and how easy it is to mention Muslims or Islam in a derogatory way, and yet the media stays quiet. At moments like those, you do feel like that you are a second-class citizen, or certainly somebody who was in suspect for one or the other reason. I think part of the problem, as a person who has immigrated from Pakistan can associate with, is the increasing role of ideology, right-wing discourse in American politics that has created that kind of a narrative to be acceptable. Why I say that? Because some 30-odd years ago, these things started happening in the context of Pakistan, where I was growing up, and I saw those happening and made a country to be very intolerant. Things that would not be acceptable were all of a sudden very acceptable. One particular sect was mandated as non-Muslim, and it was fine with people calling people belonging to that particular sect as non-Muslims or derogating and denying them social rights. I can see the parallels. That's what I was trying to say.
But still, instead of pointing fingers, I mean, I'm more concerned about. So yes, I mean, we can point fingers at neocons and other anti-Islamic forces who may be in play. But why aren't we doing anything about it? I mean, we are fortunate to be educated people. The Muslims are, fairly affluent in this country. And if you talk about the money that comes in or could potentially come in from Middle East, it's huge. Why don't we do anything?
All right. So I think, in all fairness, there has been a backlash in the media. If you remember that show by Jon Stewart, he did a show and he dedicated a large segment of that show to just this particular thing. So yes, there has been a backlash, and not just from the
but
Muslim
Bakhtiar,
community.
I'm sorry, that's sad, because we have to rely on people like Bill Maher and John. I have great respect for them. They're great comedians, and I love them. They have a political astuteness about them as well. But really,
Okay.
Jon Stewart?
We have a great respect for them, and I like them, so why not? But here's the thing.
The reason is
Muslim
because people may not take him seriously. I mean, there is a liberal. I'm sorry interjecting. And
It's an organizational issue. Are the expatriate Muslim community in the United States as organized as other expatriate communities or as other immigrant communities, i.e. the Jewish community in the United States? Certainly not. I.e. the Irish community. Maybe they have a historical or a time advantage, perhaps, but clearly the Muslim community, the Pakistani expatriate community, is certainly not that organized. Just look around you. How many forums does the Pakistani expatriate community have? The one that I know of is APNA, is the physicians community. Do you know of any other?
Well, yes, I do actually. I do know of one which is actually called the the Sindhis Association of North America. I mean, it's really
So
sad
there
that
is-
we are hung up on
There are
Apna
probably
and
500,000 Pakistani origin expatriate Pakistanis in this country, and you have two communities with about 20,000 odd.
Well, there are a couple of issues there. Certainly, we are not as organized as we perhaps should be. Secondly, there's also a bit of a disconnect. When Muslim-centric or Islam-centric issue comes up, if it's normal, regular, positive, it doesn't get the coverage because the media doesn't find it sexy. But when it's an issue which is controversial, some attack, some bomb, some nutcase doing or thinking of doing something that would hurt others, it obviously makes for the top news. So that all of that also feeds into.
also, so let me give you an example of Occupy Wall Street is one, and the Tea Party is the other. These two extremes, no more than 30 or 40 people show up at a political gathering, or they show up outside of a fundraiser, and it's news. You know why? Because somebody actually shows up and is vocal about it. Why weren't we picketing outside of Lowe's? Just the three of us with our families would have made up a few people, just the friends, show up outside of Lowe's and say, this is unfair. This is anti-American. And we would have been in the news as well. I think it takes that strength, that initiative that's lacking. So yes, there is no organization, but I think at an individual level, we should be doing something. So this is one. What we are doing right now is probably one
There's
step.
a lack of personal conviction.
Absolutely.
Lack of personal
Fair enough.
conviction, or just sheer lack of ideas or lack of commitment in some cases, or also, there may be three people showing up at Lowe's and demonstrating, but the majority of people just simply can't even do that because they're busy at work or what have you. But I take the point. I think it's a valid issue. Organization is one thing, but the personal commitment, even if you are one, but you can make your voice heard.
Well, I think again, it brings us back to that issue of organization and participation. I think there is perhaps it may well be an issue of time or historical context. Perhaps it takes a generation or more before a community does get organized enough to take part in the body politics of the society that it adapts.
I suppose that is a fair
Very
point.
true, but I think even
So-
an individual Zia's point, I think I seem to get around it now. Even if you are a single person and you show up at a meeting place of ideas and you raise your hand, stand up, say whatever you want to say, you have at least injected in that discourse a point of view that may not at the end of the day make up a part of whatever comes out of that gathering, but at least you were there, you made yourself heard, and eventually maybe the two of you or three of you.
I'll tell you. Yes.
Let
go
me
ahead.
just interject here. I just want to bring this up. Do you see, or should it not be that the expatriate Pakistani community should get involved in local politics?
Oh,
Local
absolutely,
politics, i.e.
absolutely.
Local politics, i.e., school boards. Local politics, as in village, town, and community.
And it's
boards.
happening, and it's happening. I think within our friends, we know people who've gone on to become the president of the education board. In Hartford, there is at least a couple of people who are in the council, the local council, and everything. So yes, it is
Because
happening.
in the town where I live, there is none. And I've been thinking
And
about
it has
that
to happen.
perhaps we need to, as a community, take this decision. But as individuals and as a community, need to take this decision.
But there
That
also,
certainly
let
needs
me-
to happen,
get-
but I think that's a bit separate. But yeah, it helps though, because you get yourself involved, you make yourself heard, you make yourself seen as a normal person with normal concerns, social, educational, or what have you, or political concerns. So I think at the end it will help you, but it will still not address if you're not going to speak up about the issues that are close to you in terms of.
Certainly. Actually, let me give you one more idea. Something that actually my wife did, and right after Lowe's. One thing she did was she sent 2 letters to the 2 senators of Connecticut and 1 letter to the congressman, condemning what Lowe's did. And eventually, she got a reply from each one of them. So reply is great, and that's wonderful. But the point is how many Muslims there are in the state of Connecticut and the state of New York, and if every single person wrote that letter, it's the matter of us making sure or making ourselves visible that we do exist. I think at the time nobody's to your point, right? I mean, there's no organization. I don't think anybody talks about us getting organized. The moment we talk about Pakistan, we talk about Muslim rights, you immediately get a person who looks like a Muslim, so it basically means he has a long beard and has a turban on his head, and he starts talking about what Islam is and non.
Like you and me.
Well, that's there's a lack of those people, isn't it?
But I think the issue is that there is this this tendency to sort of join into this larger Muslim identity. And I think while that is fine, that's perhaps desirable at certain points, I think there are clearly points or clearly issues and instances where the expatriate Pakistani community, and I keep referring to that is because I am an expatriate Pakistani, needs to establish its own identity and take a stand on specific issues that relate to them and not so much to the greater Muslim community. And I think so what happens is that when you are part of this larger Muslim identity, you relegate your rights and you sort of you leave it to someone else to speak up for you. And I think that essentially is one of the problems why you don't see people out there. We need to assert our own identity as well as a collective larger Muslim identity.
I would agree.
I suppose we all do agree with the simple fact that we have to come out of this slumber. I think we have to speak out. We have to make other people, mostly all the other Americans, know that we do have rights as well, and we need to ask for it. Otherwise, nobody's going to hand it to us in a silver platter. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.